three-step operation. First, the states have to be called to assemble and in session so that the Federation can operate properly. And then the states form their states of states to make the Confederation possible.
Right.
And then the Confederation rebuilds the Federal Republic as an American federal subcontractor. Right? And the counties need to realize that the counties are shut off from any voice in the wider world outside their county borders, except through their state. It was set up that way deliberately as a safeguard so that individual counties could not be corrupted or converted by foreign governments.
Yeah, that's a key piece.
It's a key piece. The counties speak on international affairs through their state, and their state speaks in international and global affairs through the Federation.
And then what happens when you put the Confederation on top of that and then the Federal Republic? How does the authority work?
Well, basically what happened is the states came together and they set up the Federation as a holding company.
Right. Unincorporated.
Right, an unincorporated holding company. And what it held were the mutually shared powers. Those powers that were delegated to the Federation by the states so that they could all act together as a united front in international affairs. Okay, so everything that is mutually held power is first delegated to the United States of America, the unincorporated federation. The next step was the creation of the Confederation. Okay, so you have the states operating as the United States with a capital T. Then you have the Federation, the United States of America, upper lowercase, capital T on the, okay. And next you have the Confederation. And okay, so what is a confederation? Well, that is not an opposition to the Federation. It is an instrumentality of the Federation.
And that consists of the states of states.
And that's the states of states. The American states of states. So maybe I ought to discuss the concept of an instrumentality.
Yes, please.
An instrument, like a tool, like a forceps or a pliers, that you use to accomplish specific tasks or work, right? So when I say that the Confederation was an instrumentality of the Federation, that's just like saying your pair of pliers is an instrumentality of you. And saying that the Federation is an instrumentality of the states implies the same thing. Now we use these tools, these instrumentalities, to accomplish work, either that we cannot or don't want to accomplish ourselves, okay, or to operate in realms where we can't operate ourselves. Okay, so
that would be in a different jurisdiction, for example.
Right. So, for example, we set up the Confederation, the states of states, because the states were not supposed to be in session all the time. In a country with a government that is operated directly by the people, of the people, for the people, by the people, right? You don't have an option of having professional bureaucrats and professional representatives in session all the time. People have lives. They have professions of their own. And so the states were never designed to be in constant session. Instead, what was supposed to happen is that the states were supposed to set up agreements about what kinds of services and what kinds of international agreements they would have. And when the states were not in session, the states of states would act as the business organizations providing services to people in the state. They would be handling things like keeping record of land sales, mining claims, all those sorts of things that are important to the state, but which require a 365-day-a-year presence. Okay, so the state of state is an instrumentality of the state. And originally, the Federation set up the Confederation and delegated certain jobs to the Confederation to do.
Yep, that makes sense.
And it was all American.
Mm-hmm. And all unincorporated.
It was all unincorporated, and it was all American. Okay? So the first delegation was to the Confederation to carry out day-to-day business when the states were not directly in session. There would still be a state-of-state organization there, you know, keeping the lights on, keeping just the regular functions that we think of government operating. And it was all American, it was all unincorporated, and that was just fine. Okay, but then we come to settling the War of Independence. And during the peace process, various quid pro quos and accommodations were made to secure the peace. All right, well, part of that was some power sharing agreements in which Britain and the Pope got to play some roles by agreement. And those agreements are called constitutions. Okay, so the very first thing that happened was that the Confederation of States delegated some powers to what we call the Federal Republic. The Federal Republic, again, was an American instrumentality of the Confederation of States. So it was a secondary delegation that was permitted ultimately by the Federation of States through the Confederation, which was responsible for operating the Federal Republic and providing oversight for it. And that happened in 1787. You can read the results in the Constitution that resulted, and that is called the Federal Constitution because it was the Constitution of the Federal Republic. And there you will see outlined all of the various duties, all of the things that that federal entity, that subcontractor, an American subcontractor, was supposed to provide. Okay, so it's It's making an orderly progression of delegation of powers and duties. That was done in 1787. 2 years later, they set up the territorial constitution called the Constitution of the United States of America. That's the one that we've heard about all of our lives, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that was a British territorial subcontractor and a separate constitution, which looks a great deal like the federal constitution, but is actually tweaked in various ways to expedite the duties and powers that were shared out to the Queen. And last, okay, that happened in 1789. And last, we have a similar profit sharing agreement that was worked out with the Pope, with the Holy Roman Empire. And that is called the Constitution of the United States. No America about it, okay? So they had their own subcontracting agreement that they're obligated to obey and perform. And all of this ultimately threaded back to the Federation, and from the Federation to the individual states, and the individual states ratified it. So if you wanted to think about this as a funnel, you've got the 50 states all funneling in to the Federation, and then you've got the Federation successively delegating powers, first to the Confederation, then through the Confederation to the Federal Republic, all of which are American, and then to a British territorial subcontractor and to a Holy Roman Empire subcontractor.
Very good. Thank you for that. That's fantastic. Now, what recently took place, though, is that the constitutions are essentially contracts for power sharing agreements.
Right.
But you have released those contracts and said, no contract with the territorial, no contract with the municipal. The only guy who has a contract is Donald J. Trump. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, well, you said it correctly. I'm not sure that everybody's understanding it correctly. You see, we never had a contract with those corporations.
Right.
In between the original setup of the constitutions and now, our subcontractors reorganized their business. The Pope and the Queen and the Lord Mayor of London decided to convert their original businesses, which were all unincorporated businesses, right,
Okay.
into corporations, and to charter out those functions to corporations. Okay, that happened about 70 years after the constitutions were put in place.
Okay.
So they're still operating these corporations, and they are still responsible for the operations of these corporations. But we don't have a contract with those corporations.
Right.
We have a contract with the Queen.
Right.
We have a contract with the Lord Mayor. We have a contract with the Holy Roman Empire and the Pope acting as Roman Pontiff. All right. These things that we're watching right now, the USA Inc. and the US Inc., are just corporations like any commercial corporation.
Sure.
Okay. And since we don't have a contract with them directly, any complaints that we have with them go back to what are called the principals,
Mm-hmm.
the Queen, the Lord Mayor, and the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
And really, you have to think about this in terms of being the employers. Okay. We have hired the Queen and the Lord Mayor and the Pope to do certain specific jobs for us, just like you might hire an electrician or a plumber to do a specific job for you, okay? And they have then used an instrumentality, a corporation, to deliver that service to us.
Okay.
Okay, so ultimately we're the employers.
Right.
And they are the employees.
Right.
So the corporations have got a contract with the Queen or with the Pope. We have a contract with the Queen or the Pope. And it works like the house that Jack built.
Mm-hmm.
We begin beating the Queen and the Pope about the misdeeds of their corporations. And their corporations are then in a welter trying to figure out, oh, we're doing this wrong, okay? The stick begins to beat the dog begins to chase the cat begins to chase the rat that ate the cheese that sat in the house that Jack built. And it's that kind of, I hesitate to say hierarchy, because hierarchy implies that you know, this is all some great power thing, but it's really just an employer gets to demand what they want and need from their employees according to a contract.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just enforcing a contract.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody has cause to know what the contract is.
Absolutely.
Now, because we don't have a direct contract with any of these corporations, what these corporations do, how they, decide who's going to be their president, not our president, their president, and how they interact with each other is immaterial to us as employers.
Right.
They have their own organizational faux pas, their own power struggles. They have political parties, we don't. They're foreign to us, okay? So these foreign corporations are here fighting out over all of these different issues. But to us as employers, what matters is, are they doing their jobs? How well are they doing their jobs? Are they trespassing in some way that's harming us? Those are our concerns.
Sure.
We don't care who provides those services. I mean, it, in the great picture of things, doesn't matter if Juan Rodriguez mows my lawn, or if Patty O'Brien mows my lawn, or if Jacques Flambeau mows my lawn. It's completely immaterial to me. What matters is that my lawn gets mowed on schedule the way I like it.
Right.
And if it doesn't, then we got a problem.
Right.
And so, a lot of this stuff has to do with making the principals aware of the problems that their instrumentalities, their corporations, their governmental services corporations are causing. And then secondarily, assessing the performance of those corporations. And finally, bringing forward any trespasses that these corporations have made against their employers.
Mm-hmm.
And people should be thinking about it in terms of that employer-employee construct.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a certain element of trust involved here, and therefore the fundamental crime of breach of trust. Because when you turn to your employee and you give him a lawnmower, and you say, okay, this is my lawn, there are the borders of my lawn with the other neighbor, and you're supposed to cut the grass in this area. Okay. You've given instructions. We gave the constitutions, right? Those are the instructions. And if they don't do the job, then there's a problem. If they do the job, but then they lop onto the neighbor's yard, there's a problem. If they break the lawnmower, then we have a question of who's going to pay for the lawnmower. This is an employer-employee relationship. And to the extent that our trust in our employees is misplaced by deliberate malfeasance and trespass and bad behavior on the part of the employees, then that is a true breach of trust. That's beyond the realm of, oh, gee, I hit a tree branch, or I hit a tree root and broke the blade on the lawnmower. I mean, we're not talking about stuff like that when we're talking breach of trust. When we're talking about breach of trust, we're talking about people deliberately abusing their office or their job, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there's been plenty of that that's gone on. One of the problems that we have with Joe Biden is that he provably and admittedly acted in breach of trust.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
By selling his office, by abusing his office as vice president under Obama, he breached our trust. Therefore, we don't want anything to do with him. And frankly, we don't have any obligation to his corporation, no matter what they do.
Right.
Remember, we don't have a contract with them. We've got a contract with the Pope.
Right.
So, on the other hand, Donald Trump has kept his word. This is a good employee. This is somebody that, really went out there and did his best for the country, according to the lights he saw. And for that reason, we extended his contract. Now, something else people aren't understanding is that there's a difference between the office of the president and the office of the commander-in-chief.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They're two completely separate offices. Lincoln, in fact, operated solely as the commander-in-chief from March of 1863 until his death in April of 1865. So there is precedence for this. I've had a bunch of people saying, oh, he didn't sign the Insurrection Act. He can only invoke the Insurrection Act. No, the president can only invoke the Insurrection Act. The commander-in-chief can sign the Insurrection Act and implement it.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So, it's a whole different office.
It is, and a whole different way of operating.
Exactly. And so Trump is now acting as commander-in-chief, whether or not he ever contests further the whole presidential bailiwick of another foreign corporation. All right?
Okay.
Both of these corporations are ultimately owned by the Pope. One of them is operated by the Pope. That's the U.S. Municipal Corporation has been operated by the Pope directly. And the other one has been owned by the Pope, but operated by the British Queen.
Right.
Okay. But at the end of the day, you've got one giant puppeteer up here manipulating both of these corporations.
Right.
And so if these corporations come to blows on our shore, there's only one person left to blame, and that is Pope Francis.
Right.
And that is why so much effort has gone into negotiating with the Pope and bringing notices to the popes and, trying to work out some kind of understanding regarding the obligations, the ultimate obligations of the Pope, both with respect to the municipal government and with the respect to the territorial, aka Commonwealth government.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So people that think that, well, she's talking to the Pope. She did some work for the Pope. Oh, at least the old Pope. Oh, she must be one of them. She must be a Vatican agent. There's no way to avoid talking to the Pope in this situation. The Pope is in charge of two of our federal subcontractors. Our own federal subcontractor, the Federal Republic, has been dead in the water since 1865, and the Confederation has been vacated since 1865. So guess what? Everything then reverts back to the Federation and the states and the people by operation of law. The moment that the Federal Republic ceased operations, all of the powers delegated to it by the Confederation went back to the Confederation. The moment that the Confederation stopped functioning, which was in 1861, all the powers originally delegated to the Confederation went back to the delegator, the Federation. The powers of the two other remaining foreign federal subcontractors remained with them as long as they were playing straight and as long as they were getting the job done. But when they become unable or unwilling to perform, then they lose their contracts and their delegated powers too. And once again, it all reverts by operation of law back to the delegator, which in this case is the Federation of States.
Very good. So then, to be clear, you told the Lord Mayor, the Pope, and the Queen no contract.
Yeah, I basically said, look, we have no contract with these corporations. They're not operating properly. They're your responsibility. They're chartered under your authority, and they are serving or servicing your contract. So, basically we went on the principals who are responsible for the performance of these corporations. And in response, they bankrupted the corporations.
Both of them.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have two bankrupt service providers. Wonderful. They're both incompetent. Their delegated powers have returned to the delegator, or here's the rest of the story. The Holy See and the British government, both Westminster and the Queen's government, are responsible for providing us with the services that they owe us under the original terms. And we, meanwhile, are going huckledybuck to restore the structure of our government, the American Confederation, and the American Federal Republic. Now, some people have mischaracterized me as an obstructionist merely because I have observed that in order to restore and reconstruct our government as it is supposed to be, our states have to come back into session. The Federation has got to delegate responsibilities to the Confederation and form American states of states, right?
Yeah.
And then the Confederation which is using the Federal Republic as an instrumentality, needs to form the Federal Republic again.
Right.
So it's ultimately a three-step operation. First, the states have to be called to assemble and in session so that the Federation can operate properly.
Mm-hmm.
And then the states form their states of states to make the Confederation possible.
Right.
And then the Confederation rebuilds the Federal Republic as an American federal subcontractor.
Right.
All right? Everybody got that? However, here we are. Our states are barely assembled and functioning. We have enough Americans to populate them all, and we're present and accounted for, okay? So the Federation is enabled now to act upon non-administrative duties by calling roll call votes of the states, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're really just getting started again. We don't have our Confederation set up.
No.
And without the Confederation, we don't have a way to set up the Federal Republic.
No.
Okay, so this is what people are thinking. However, though it in no way changes the need to reconstruct the Confederation and to reconstruct the Federal Republic in order to restore our entire government.
Mm-hmm.
Remember what I said about the delegated powers reverting back to the delegator.
Right. Right.
We can actually operate all of those things via the Federation.
Oh, okay.
The Federation has the power and the ability to do all of the functions that were delegated away from it that return to it by operation of law.
Duh. Yes, of course. Yeah,
Okay,
because
so
they're just simply delegating.
right, those are instrumentalities. We
Yes.
don't have to use those instrumentalities in order to get the job done. We
Ah,
can operate the Federal Republic directly.
right. Okay.
That's what we did in the beginning for 5 years. We can do it again. There's nothing stopping us. It's our right and it's our structure. It's the way the states and the people operated from the very beginning. So
Mhm.
the Federation can operate and provide oversight for the Federal Republic. And as long as we have employees who are willing to abide by that contract, who are Americans, then they can fulfill those jobs. And that's why Donald Trump is eligible to fulfill those jobs. And that's why the Federal Republic can be restored under Donald Trump without any problem, no matter what the other subcontractors do, and no matter what these incorporated entities try to pull.
That's fantastic news.
Well, it's just the law. That's, and it's the public law. And that's another thing a lot of people have not been understanding. The
No.
public law has not been enforced in this country for 2 generations.
Right.
It hasn't even been taught in our law schools because it wasn't being used. Everybody had been latched upon, and via this completely fraudulent process had been misidentified as British territorial citizens. And British territorial citizens had no ability to take recourse to our common law. Okay, right. So our common law hasn't been used or enforced in 2 generations.
Mm-hmm.
But our common law, our public law, is actually the law of this country. And we have the inherent right to enforce it now that we are shed of these false presumptions and false registrations as British or Holy Roman Empire employees, now we are set free again to enforce the public law. And what is coming as such a shock to so many of these corporations is that, oh my God, there is a public law. Oh my God, there are people that can enforce it. Oh no, what happens to us then? Well, Warren Buffett and I share something in common. Warren Buffett and I remember the public law and how the public law can be applied to abolish and defund and destroy any corporation.
Right. And you mentioned that, go ahead.
Well, so here we have the situation. Google, Facebook, all these entities, these big tech corporations are on our shores, and they are infringing on our right to free speech and our access to the airwaves because they want to pretend that they are private corporations. But number one, they're not private corporations, they're public corporations. And number two, they're on our soil.
Mm-hmm.
So if they are infringing on our fundamental unalienable and both inalienable and unalienable rights, while abusing their privilege to use our electrical grid and our communications grid and our airwaves,
mm-hmm.
There's a problem, folks.
Yeah, a big one.
So they've been given 24 hours to bring their community standards and their private corporate policies in line with the public law, which includes the Constitution.
When did that start?
This afternoon.
Oh, fantastic.
So they are not long for this world if they don't get their butts in order and start doing what's right. They'll simply be nationalized, their assets will be taken, their officers, their shareholders, their boards of directors will be punished, and life will go on.
Yep.
With or without Microsoft being called Microsoft, with or without anybody of the Gates family having a foundation, you know, all of this stuff it's been upside down and backwards.
Oh, yeah.
Where private interests have been usurping against the public interests, where the pretend government, the service providers have been masquerading as the actual government. And, you know, at the end of the day, the actual government comes out of the closet and says, you think what? You did what? We're not going back to the days of the robber barons. And despite what the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all the rest of them may think, they're not going to be around to create any more trouble for anybody.